All right. Thank you. Hey, I just learned that this is the last session of the day. Sorry that you're waiting for so long.
I was asking you, I was like, oh, do you know Mike Butcher? And it's like, yeah, everybody knows Mike Butcher.
Yes, Mike. Oh, look at that. Look at this photo
I had
of
a
you.
beard. Yeah, I know. That's it was a COVID beard. You know,
It was what?
A COVID beard.
Oh, it's COVID. Okay. Everyone tried something new on because they didn't have to see their colleagues then.
I just didn't want to shave as much. I wasn't leaving the house as often.
You look very, very regal.
Should I grow it back?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. It suits you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Let's go.
I'm insulted that, my bare face doesn't do it for you. The same way.
How about my bare head? All right, let's go.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about?
I hear all these stories about musicians who have been in the industry for a long time, and they get really annoyed when you ask them to play the old songs. Do you feel the same way talking about the iPod?
I actually I was thinking about that. I was like, I love music. And I'm like, oh, I love music. It's just something that's so important to me. And I listen to it all the time. And then I thought, man, to have to play the same song for 40 years, I'm going to go fucking nuts. That's crazy. But those guys do it, and they do a great job. But yeah, no, yeah. What was the question?
Are you sick talking about the iPod?
Well, no, it was actually last week was the 23rd
You
anniversary
had
of
two
it.
big anniversaries in
Last week
month.
was two big anniversaries. So it was the 23rd anniversary of the iPod launch, and it was the 13th anniversary of the first Nest product launch. So that was pretty crazy. It's always in that week for whatever reason. I guess the stars aligned in astrology or whatever it is, but that's why. So I don't know.
I'm going to go way
You're
back.
dating me, you know that?
Oh, I'm going to go way back.
Yeah. I had hair back then. Just
You're-
like he used to have hair on his face.
Your father was a salesman.
My dad was a salesman. He was a diehard salesman.
My father was also a salesman.
What did he sell?
He sold jewelry and watch parts.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, traveled around the country.
All right.
How much of what you do now is sales?
Well, look, I learned this from the days of building stuff from, at General Magic and then at Philips and building, handhelds and stuff. It was like I learned that we could build anything. But if you can't sell and market it, doesn't matter. And so I had to learn those skills. I remember those days, and it was my dad had somebody else's product, and then he would sell it in front of people, right, as opposed to big marketing.
Jeans? Is that right?
Levi's jeans. Yeah, he worked
Those
for
don't
Levi's
sell
for 34
themselves?
years ago. For 34 years, what?
I think they sell themselves, don't they?
Back then they did, but so we were chasing all the volume and all the stuff back then. But yeah, no, you have to learn to know how to sell your stuff and market it. And I just remember my very first product that I did when I was in college, and I spent all the money on designing and building a microprocessor. I had zero money left to actually tell the world about it. And you're like, oh, wait a second, and then you learn. Today it's not the same math, but I needed about 5 to 10 times more money for the sales and marketing than I did for the development of the product. Now it's a lot cheaper now with social and stuff like that, but it was crazy to, you're like, oh yeah, I just build it and they will come. And it's like, no way.
Is there an extent to which General Magic was a branding issue?
General Magic is all kinds of issues. If anyone hasn't seen it, you should check out the General Magic movie. I highly recommend it. It's still relevant today. But no, it was all kinds of. It was literally, we were solving problems. It was at General Magic. We were creating the iPhone 15 years too early. There was no internet. There was no mobile. There was no mobile phones. There was no. It was literally.
What you're describing is a phone.
Yeah, there was nothing. Yeah, it was an iPod, or actually an iPhone, but it was literally you plug in a phone line and it had a modem in it and it did stuff, right? So, and then there was one version that was mobile with a radio, an analog radio thing. But anyways, we were solving email and e-ticketing and downloadable games and animations, and we had emojis back then. We had all of those things, but at the end of the day, no one knew what the hell it was, because they never had the problems. And so the other thing was, when you're selling something, you got to make sure people understand the problem you're solving and they have the problem you're solving. Because otherwise, we were creating the iPhone so early that we ourselves on the team didn't even have these problems. Like, okay, what is e-shopping?
Yeah.
You know, this was pre-internet in 1992. So I learned a lot about you got to hit the market at the right time, even though ideas were so seminal. And there's a lot of the people in the team, myself, we created Android at General Magic. Well, the people at General Magic created Android later. We created iPhone. Like, it was all kinds of stuff. But you just have to make sure the time's right, and you know how to market it, and you know what problem you're trying to solve.
And the technology is there where you could actually
And the
achieve it all.
technology was definitely, you had to be there as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. In your book, you I want to say you caution recent graduates, people new to the industry, to not work with a larger company. But
Yeah.
it seems to have served you pretty well.
Well, no, I did both.
Yeah.
And so I recommend to entrepreneurs and everything that, you know, you can start your own company, but if you don't know what one looks like, or you don't know what a big company looks like that you don't want to build, you need to go into one of them to experience it. Because the way you operate in a large company, and that's 500 people or more, or even 200 people or more, is very different than when you're a startup of 10 or 15 people. And if you don't have a model in your mind of how these work and worked in them, you have no idea what you're growing up into. Like, we have models, and people have role models for how you live. You have Big Brother, or you have your aunt or uncle, or you have somebody that you have a role model as you grow, and you try to become that. If you don't have something like that, or the antithesis of that, so you know what you're trying to build, you're like hamstrung. And so in the book, I have this thing called what was it called? Breakpoints. And people don't understand that when you grow from 5 to 10 people total in the team, and you go to the next level, 15, 20, you have a different culture and a different way you communicate. And then it happens again at 30 to 40, and then again at 120. These things are fundamental because they're human factor, human nature issues. And most people don't understand that you go through these things. And we have to educate our startups, because we've invested directly into over 200 startups around the world. And we have to teach these basic things to each of these entrepreneurs, that you're going to hit these breakpoints, and plan for these breakpoints, and understand what your organization structure looks like, and your communication structure looks like, and how you're going to communicate to your individuals when, like, we're growing, and don't worry, when you lose half of your responsibilities to a whole other set of people, it's going to be okay. Like, there's all this stuff besides just making the product you have to worry about as an entrepreneur, as a leader, whether that's a manager, director, vice president, or whatever. You have to be able to understand the human nature issues that go along with growth and building things.
You bring up a really important point that I don't think is discussed enough, but the ability to let go of things, to trust the people on your team.
Right.
Was that a difficult lesson for you?
For me? Oh yeah, I wrote a whole chapter on it, how I fucked up being a manager for the first time at 23, 24. I became a CTO and a vice president at Philips, and we had almost 300,000 people at this company, and I was doing a startup inside of Philips, and I was literally in charge. I had to build a team of hundreds of people, and I had never even managed one person in my life.
That you were coming straight from that semiconductor company.
I was coming straight from General Magic. Actually.
Okay.
I was coming.
But you effectively talked your way into a job, it sounds like.
Well, I presented a model. I presented a business plan to the CEO of Philips at the time. And they're like, yeah. And they were a General Magic licensee. And they said, yeah, we want that. You go build it. I was like, be careful what you wish for. And I literally, 24 hours after they said, you're going to do this, I was like, holy shit, what the fuck did I just do? I was like curled up in a ball going, how can I do this? And I was 24. And then I failed as a manager for the first year, and I had to go get training and understand you can't micromanage, and you have to learn how to delegate and trust. And oh my God, it was freaking ridiculous how bad I was as a manager.
There's also a chapter in your book called Assholes.
Yeah, for sure.
And you break down the different kinds of assholes.
The different kinds of assholes, yes.
Have you become more, I guess, magnanimous as you've been in this industry longer? Do you feel like you're an easier boss?
No, I just know where to push and what not to push on now. So I'm not easier. I'm just more directed, and I know exactly what to say at certain times, and I know when to back off and go, let them figure it out on themselves. You want to give people enough rope but not enough rope to hang themselves with. So you're like, okay, they're going to have to learn. They're not going to know all this stuff, so you got to let them go, and there's some machinations. And yes, they might not do it as efficiently as it could be done, but that's how you grow teams and you grow leaders. Because I'm not sitting here because I knew everything when I was young. It's because I went through all those failure points along the way, and people gave me enough rope, but not enough rope to kill myself or the company with. And so those things are really important. So now I'm really directed on the things that really matter, and then I let them go off, and then I give them some mentorship from time to time on, oh, okay, maybe we should think about this. Maybe you should think about it this way.
Which on the spectrum of assholes that you spell out in the book, mission-driven, do you feel like that's the kind of the path you've gone down?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, people normally, you know, they work with people who are very difficult. And those are the ones that usually, you know, create and change the world. But there are two types of assholes. But you know, the reflex is everybody's an asshole, but you got to really understand why. And if they're an asshole because it's their ego, they're trying to push people down because they're trying to, you know, just control things, that is an egocentric asshole. But if you are an asshole on the details, you're sitting there pushing on the details, you're not criticizing the people, but you are critiquing their work and saying, you can do better, we need to look at this detail, we need to look at that detail, because it's in service of a mission to provide the customer what they really need, what we're trying to deliver, and make sure this team does that. That is a mission-driven asshole, and people go, that's just an asshole. It's like, no, they're just being really keen on the details to make sure you get them right. And that is not a bad thing. That is exactly what you need to do to make world-class products, is be in the details. And if the leader or the manager or whoever it is you're working for, or all the way up at the top, is into the details, that's a good thing because they care. They give a shit. Right? And it's, yes, they're going to push you. And a lot of times I push people because I know that they can do it. They're just tired, or they're just like, they're having issues with whatever it is, or they need some political issues fixed, or they need a resource thing. It's like, we can do this, people. We just need to fix that, and we need to fix this or fix that. And you have to know which details matter and which ones don't matter so much for the customer. But you got to push. And a lot of people, when they're tired, like, oh, that fucking asshole's making me work late tonight. It's like, because we're doing it in service of something, why we're all there on a mission.
Yeah.
We're all on a mission to make this thing, whatever it is, atoms or bits or who knows what.
You know, we were talking about the distinction between working at a startup and working at a corporation, and you, there is a period when you sold Nest to Google, and it's, you kind of, you, can you, I don't know if you can see him roll.
Well, I have a whole chapter about it in the book.
But, you know, you talk about these breakpoints, and that's kind of like an overnight breakpoint. The culture just completely changes.
Well, it didn't completely change. There was a few things that we did wrong, that I learned from that we did wrong, to allow the culture to change too quickly. And so I and our management team screwed that up too much, and we put it in the book. But literally, there are culture changes whenever. And if you look at most M&As, 75 to 85% of all M&As fail, not because it's a great financial idea, not because it's a great product synergy idea. It's because the cultures are dramatically different. We hear about founder mode. Everybody's talking about founder mode. Well, you go from founder mode into these other companies that are just sitting around going, yeah, we're just getting cash from this search tree. The cash is just falling down. We don't have to work very hard. And Jay, let's just get massages and go to work. Like we're busting our ass, you know, making stuff happen in this startup. And all of a sudden everyone's like, whatever, it doesn't matter. We just keep making cash and losing cash in all these hobby projects we do.
With hindsight, would you say that the Nest deal is in the 80%, or generally speaking, was that?
Well, the Nest failed for cultural reasons, without a doubt. It was a culture clash, 100%. Even though we went in and we understood that. I knew culture clashes happened, but we had this kind of marriage contract. Like it was a prenuptial agreement saying, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and we're going to do this and this and this. And they literally didn't honor that. They like woke up a month later and go, yeah, fuck that. You now work for us. We're not listening to what you need. And that's kind of what happened.
Was, in your experience, in your time at both companies, was the culture dramatically different between Apple and Google?
It couldn't have been more different.
Yeah.
It was 180 degrees different.
How so?
Apple, Apple is so, well, that was then. I don't know about now.
Yeah, we'll talk
I've been
about.
out
We
of
can
Apple
talk about now.
13, 15 years now.
Well, the Nest just turned 13, so
Yeah, that's right. So 14 years, something like that. And when it was like, you could not hide. At Apple, sooner or later, you maybe had 2 or 3 days. If you were hiding, that someone would go, what the fuck? Why aren't you doing the thing we need? Because everybody was like critical to the programs. Google, 20% time. You're lucky if they even showed up. Or they just showed up on a bus and they came in for lunch and then they took the bus home. Say, I went to work today. I'm getting a massage. Oh, where's the yogurt I like? Like, it was bullshit. And so, like, everyone could hide.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I don't like any of our startups hiring most Googlers who've been in there for 15, 20 years, because you get this culture thing. So let me give you an example. Perfect example is, so back at General Magic in the 90s, we had this thing like, we're working, and we're all these startup people working really hard. A lot of them are for Apple, and we're like, doing what we were doing. And we were like, oh, we need to hire professional management in. We need more, which we did. But we all said we didn't need it. That's a whole nother story. That's also in the book. But anyways, so we said we will never hire people from the East Coast. So this was IBM and DEC and Sperry and all that shit. Because they had to have their driver, or they had to have their company car, and they had to have their corporate lunch special thing and their special executive toilet. We're like, we're never hiring any of those people at General Motors. It's just not going to work. It's a culture clash, right? And so we were, and that was in the 90s. Bang, 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 bang. And now I wake up today, and Silicon Valley has turned into that shit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, get me the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Entitlement everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, get me out. And that's why I haven't been here for 10 years.
So you do have some crossover with X. You were managing the Glass team.
Yep.
I guess I can't say X anymore. Google X, Alphabet X. I need to specify.
Yeah, Alphabet X, right?
Can those kinds of moonshots? Do you feel like they can actually happen in the context of a large corporation like that?
Not when they're given unlimited resources and they're not constrained, and that they're basically a bunch of founders' pet projects because they think they're really cool and they're going to change the world. Now, Waymo's around, and we like Waymo, right? It's great. But how many tens of billions of dollars have been spent on Waymo, and it's still not a business that's making money, right? It's a loss-making business. Doesn't make money yet. The cars are way too expensive, all that stuff. It's going to get there, but that thing got started in 2010? Something like that. So sure, it's going to be great. And we saw a lot of other startups die along the way. That's great. But if you look at how many other things that happened at Google that were none of them.
Yeah.
None of them have panned out in Alphabet.
Yeah. You're Mr. Deep Tech guy now, so you're dealing with these companies that, like, by the nature of the technology, they have to have a long runway.
For sure. But you also have to have a constrained budget. You have to know what you're working on. You have to make sure people are working their asses off 6 days a week to really make this stuff happen. Not, 40% in the office and then, mostly socializing. So you have to really, really understand where you're going for. And you have to have near-term milestones and not boiling the ocean and saying this was the problem at General Magic. It was always, next year we're going to ship. Next year, and 4 years in, we shipped something that was bloated, and we never even got any customer feedback. You have to, because your teams change. So if you go on these 10-year projects, I look at like when they make the Bay Bridge or something, those are 10 or 15-year projects. The team has changed over totally four times. You can't keep the team engaged. You can't keep them motivated for all those years. When you're in a startup, you got to really understand we're tightly constrained. We're getting to the next milestone. Everybody understands the next thing, so you feel like there's progress and the team can stay together. But you can't do it for a long, long time before you get customer feedback. It doesn't work that way.
You mentioned the 80% of M&As that fail. I have to imagine that the number is significantly higher than that when we're talking about deep tech investments.
Well, for M&A?
Just in terms of, these kind of like far out, long shot bets.
For deep tech, for sure. Look, it's VC business. And so deep tech VC, you're going to lose 85% of your portfolio. It's either going to be a push or it's going to be a write-off. It's going to be a crater, right? So, but the ones that do go, are insane because they're fundamental disruptive stuff. So believe me, I'm sitting here, it's a white knuckly thing. Like you're like, another one went down. Oh, fuck. Another one went down. Another one went down. Like you just sit here and like, but these three, oh my God. And then we find some dark horse in the portfolio, like come from nowhere where you were going to write them off and then all of a sudden, boom, they come from nowhere. So you really don't know, but that's the goal of doing it. But you have each of these teams have constrained resources. They really know what the problem they are trying to solve, and they're really working through it, right? And you do have some winners. So you're going to say that's like Alphabet. But when you're spending and losing billions, it's a whole nother level of calculus there. And so, and still, what is the output there?
It's a general magic problem where you can either be too early or too late to a technology.
Or the technology just doesn't work.
Well, sure.
Right? Or the technology just doesn't work. Yeah.
Again, I assume a lot of these you're looking like 5-10 years out. So
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
really complex math that you have to do.
Yeah, it is. But if you understand the fundamental technology and the first principles thinking of stuff, you can see it. If you can properly manage your capital, human capital as well as financial capital, if you can really make small milestones along the way to get to see that stuff that happen, there are other investors. Then people start coming in and they start plowing in. I look at a company like Diamond Foundry, right? Do we have that? Well, let's put the AI slide up there. Where is it? Can we go to the next slide? Or you guys are seeing the AI slide. So here's the AI slide. Okay. Like all these companies, a lot of them, some of them like Orianis is 2015. We're doing cancer vaccine at Orianis. That's AI-driven. We were doing AI-driven drug development. We have cancer vaccine and cancer drugs in phase 1 trials, already completed phase 1 trials, and they're working. And we have a whole set of other drugs that were AI-driven in 2015. Right? Plumerai, which we showed today, we've been working on that for 2017. Tiny AI back in 2017 before large language model. It's working and it's being rolled out. So each of these things, all of these are AI-driven things well before the LLM revolution. And these are deep tech things that are panning out. They're profitable, or Orianis drug development's a whole other thing. But the other ones are making big differences with fundamental technology using AI in these spaces, but it took a long time to get there.
5 to 10 years from now, when we look back at this moment, will the whole LLM thing, to a certain extent, have been a bubble?
No, LLMs are great for certain things. LLMs, like if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, that's what everyone's applying because for them, LLMs are the first thing. But if you look behind the scenes at all these other things, they're all different types of models and they're combinations of different models. So if you just think that ChatGPT is it, it's not it. Actually, these are artificial specific intelligence. And artificial specific intelligence has been working. At Nest, we did the first AI in the thermostat in 2011. 13 years ago was our anniversary. We couldn't talk about AI. We couldn't talk about machine learning because people would get scared as shit. I don't want AI in my house. Now everybody wants AI everywhere. If you're at this conference, you better be talking about AI or you're irrelevant. So it's again about timing, like General Magic. So if you look at artificial specific models, they work really well. They don't hallucinate. But LLMs, they have this. They're trying to be this general thing because we're trying to make science fiction happen. But there's things you can do with business today with not these crazy models that, just like self-driving cars, are not profitable, are like consume too much power, they're like whatever. It's an idea and it works for certain things, but it is not, it's a know-it-all. And know-it-alls, we know what know-it-alls are. You don't want to hire know-it-all. I hate know-it-alls. I've known too many people in the science and research areas that say they're know-it-alls, and you're like, get away from me. You got to know what it is. You hire a person, you hire an AI agent for what you know about, what they do. I want a LinkedIn for AI, agentic AI. I want a LinkedIn that says, this are all the things it was trained on, like they went to school. They worked on these things. It's hallucinated this much. I want to know the dossier of everything before I hire them. I want the LinkedIn CV that has all this data that could come from third parties that tells me what this thing is I'm hiring. Because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm hiring them to either be and educate me, I'm hiring them to be a co-pilot with me, or I'm hiring them to replace me. I want to know what this thing is. And we need a LinkedIn for these AIs, and we're going to need governments to actually have regulations say, I need transparency on data. I need transparency on errors. I need transparency of all of these things so that we can trust that when we use them in service of our business and in service of our customers, that we're not putting our brand reputation on the line because of some bullshit technology. You would never do that. We would never do that if it didn't work. Right now, we're all adopting this thing, and we don't know what problems it causes. Look, yesterday it was like 90% of doctors who use ChatGPT to create patient reports. Hallucinations in 90% of them. Those could kill people if they gets the drug thing wrong, or who knows what it is, the treatment plan wrong. We are using this stuff, and we don't even know how it works. And believe me, I understand. I've been doing AI for 15 years, people, so I'm not just spouting shit. I'm not Sam Altman, okay? So seriously, you got to know what you're hiring here. You got to know what you're using.
Yeah.
And if we don't have transparency on data, we don't have transparency on hallucinations, you're setting yourself up for a fucking disaster. Unless it's just using a consumer and like, okay, write me a poem in Hindi that sounds like it's an Indian voice. I don't know. Sure, that's entertainment.
You're talking, I think, to a certain extent about what they call the black box problem, right?
Yeah,
It's a giant vacuum coming, sucking up all this data.
explainability.
And I would draw a parallel. You know, you and I talked about Plumer AI a couple of weeks ago with their approach and what like an Apple is doing versus Google in terms of small models.
Yeah, so yesterday, well, 2 days ago, so we have Tiny AI. Well, we were showing Tiny AI earlier this. So we're hearing about these big models. They run on massive server infrastructure that's going to be nuclear powered one day, and that's the only way it's going to work. It's crazy. We were showing Plumer AI today. It literally is 8 megabytes, not gigabytes, not terabytes, petabytes, or megabytes to make a model that is more accurate than stuff that runs in the cloud from Google or Amazon for doing video analysis, okay, security camera video analysis. 8 megabytes, running on battery-operated things, all right? And it can do person recognition, it can do, you know, all kinds of scene recognition, all kinds of stuff. 8 megabytes. So we have to understand, and then Apple this week came out with OS 18.1 or whatever, iOS 18.1, and people were like, I downloaded it, and they were like, Apple's AI stuff is meh. It's like, but it works. And like, that's the thing you want, is you start building things that work and you build on top of those and make better and better features. Not this huge thing that does everything but does nothing well. And you're like, okay, I trust that in a quarter from now it's going to get better. And it still hallucinates. And it got a little bit better. And I know how these models are built. I know the algorithms behind them. They are not going to get there. There are fundamental problems in what we're using these things for, and they're not going to get there. So I'm working on things like quantum AI and quantum LLMs and all kinds of other things, because the linear calculation space does not work for AI, for what we're trying to use it for. You got to go to quantum realm, but that's a whole nother topic.
That's a different Ant-Man sequel.
That's a whole other thing. One day we'll talk about it.
Yeah. So Apple's approach to AI works.
It's great
because it's small model.
It's constrained.
But what
And
about?
it's at the edge, and it doesn't require nuclear power.
As somebody who has been very bearish about VR over the years, what about Apple's approach to VR?
It's that simple. I don't need to say anymore.
He's just going to drop the mic.
That's it.
Too expensive.
Don't even get me started. Don't even get me started.
Listen, like, again, we were talking about Google Glass.
I've been doing VR since
Yes.
1988. Let me just say, 1988.
But you
I did.
stopped doing it.
Yeah, I even tried to do VR in 2005, 2004 at Apple.
Is it an inevitability?
It's a human factors problem.
And what's
It's a human factor. It's great for certain episodic uses. It's great for certain episodic uses. I'm going to train a doctor. A doctor is going to go through and do a thing, or you're going to have group level design. We have this thing called Gravity Sketch. So we're invested in a company called Gravity Sketch, where you do 3D design with a team collaboratively in this virtual world, and you're all standing around, you're doing the design. That's incredibly great, but you're not wearing it all day. You're not sitting there talking and there's eyes poking out going, meh, and you're talking to people. It's like, give me a freak. It's a human factors problem. Even if it's as light as possible. I believe in AR.
Okay.
But VR, for certain applications, for sure, but not how it's being pitched. It's not what it is. It's been pitched like this 4 times now, 4 generations of VR since '88, since Jaron Lanier did it. And it's still got the same problems. It's higher fidelity. It might have some better. It's still the same human factors problems.
We've got like 30 seconds left, so I'm going to ask you real quick for my own edification. I know you've invested in some robotics companies. You and I were talking about Rodney Brooks backstage. Humanoids, yay or nay?
Humanoids? For certain tasks, yes. But again, it's got to pencil out, and there's some companies like Agility and others that are penciling out. But again,
like a pragmatic approach.
It is to be able to train those things. You need a ton of data, and we saw the robots here, Waymo. How long did it take for Waymo to learn all that stuff? It's going to take that long, and these are highly constrained cases, which is great. Like I'm moving a box from here in logistics there. That stuff can start to work. But humanoid robots in your house doing all kinds of chores, that's going to take years.
Inevitably,
and cost effectively.
Tony, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.